We got one more candidate to hear from. That's Warren Varley, our District 20 candidate for the Iowa State House. Warren will hold the floor singly tonight. His opponent, Ray Bubba Sorensen, was unfortunately not able to break away from his rock painting occupation to be here. So we can stick with the same format. I'll just say we've heard a variety of local issues brought forth tonight, Warren, and what are you going to do about them in Des Moines?
Thank you, Jim. I want to first start by thanking ThePerryNews.com for hosting this event. And I especially want to thank all of you for the stamina to sit here for 2 hours and listen to all this. This really shows a great commitment and investment in the community. I'm Warren Varley, and I'm running for the Iowa House because Perry and Dawson and Linden and Panora and Stewart and all the rest of Iowa House District 20 deserves effective representation in our state capital. I'm a farmer, a lifelong farmer, a 25-year attorney and small business person, and I have a passion for economic development. I understand the concerns, Julie referenced them, but more importantly, I understand that we have a lot of potential that is just waiting to be unleashed. It's more than what you would think, but we really, I've seen so much in my experience through being an attorney and being in rural economic development. For instance, in Stewart, we worked with a group that built 32 beautiful new homes, and we have 42 duplex units in the town. This in a town that 3 years prior, we accomplished that in less than 3 years. 3 years prior, we were lucky to do 3 new homes. I've worked with a group of local farmers, worked with Farm Bureau members, worked with local investors, and worked with the local REC, and we put up 13 wind turbines. And now that local rural electric cooperative is generating a quarter of the energy that it distributes, where instead of buying it off the grid. And we have farmers that are producing electricity instead of just being landlords to a wind turbine that Mid-America owns. I led Midwest Partnership, a local regional economic development group. And one of the things that we accomplished while I was there was to initiate an employer educator summit. The one this year is going to be in Panora. And what we do is we gather together business leaders, employers, educators, community college and high school educators, and we work on coming up with innovative solutions for filling the middle skills gap that we have in our workforce. Now, this is not about me. This is about public service. And I learned public service from my father, Andy Varley, who served as the state representative representing this area, became Speaker of the House. And I think right now, we Iowans are sick and tired of the two extremes butting heads, putting us into persistent gridlock, while the lobbyists are writing the legislation. What my dad did was work to build a consensus. He worked across the aisle. He brought people together around the idea that what we're trying to do is what's best for the people of Iowa. That's what we need. That's what I want to do. And that's why I want to represent you in the Iowa House. I'd be happy to take your questions. I'm anxious to hear your ideas and thoughts.
Well, you know, I've got a couple here on index cards that are related. They're both about education. The first is, I guess, the broader. In light of the lack of governance and oversight and guidelines for homeschooling? What is your position on homeschooling? The second one, what's your position on continuing the secure and advanced division for education, the SAVE penny?
Okay. Homeschooling. I have to be careful here because Jake Chapman's at the back of the room, and I don't want to step on his toes. Because
don't worry about me.
I'm serious about wanting to work across the aisles. But I have grave concerns about the direction that the legislature has been moving in terms of shifting public funds to support private education. I honestly think that's a mistake. In terms of oversight, we have two main concerns there. One is, so we want to make sure that all students in Iowa get a good education, that they're prepared to be good citizens and to be productive citizens. And if we have homeschooling, right now the deal is if you aren't taking public funding, you don't have to have state oversight. The other is a public safety issue that we know firsthand right here what can happen if there isn't some kind of opportunity to check on the kids and know how the kids are doing. In terms of the penny SAVE fund, I'm not a big fan of sales tax, but the SAVE fund has been a wonderful resource for schools and has allowed them to provide infrastructure without the necessity and the expense of going to a bond issue. And so I would be in favor of extending the SAVE fund. I think it's been a good resource. It helps balance our tax burden in terms of where we're drawing tax dollars from in order to support our public education. But it's, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a part of your sales tax. 1 penny goes toward the SAVE fund, and then that's made available for school infrastructure. Yes, Mr. Burtons, sorry.
Whoa.
Mr. Greenway.
That's a big confusion. Okay, the state said they were going to try and cut $100 million. Okay, had a chance to talk to Lieutenant Governor Greg on this, and I asked him how they could do that without slashing services. And he said, well, we're not going to hit probably the $100 million, but that's what we're going to shoot for. Now, do you have any idea, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot because you're not in the state legislature, how they propose to slash that much dollars and not slash a ton of services and people?
Yeah, no better. I understand your question. The legislature at the end of last session passed a tax reform act based on the legislation that was passed by Congress. And the fiscal impact statement that I've seen corresponds to the figure you're quoted, that next year there'll be $100 million less available in the general fund to meet the state's expenses. And it's projected to increase, I think, $220 million the second year. So the state legislature is going to have a very difficult problem. And the services that are going to be impacted the most, I mean, I'm about the stingiest person you'll ever meet. My wife will testify to that. And I don't want to waste any money, but state services have been cut to the bone. We've kept education funding at minimal levels for 8 out of the last 9 years. It's not been keeping up with inflation. I'm sure any of you who know teachers know what a struggle it's been for them to find resources, how difficult it is for school boards to adequately fund positions so that it's hard to keep and acquire and retain teachers. So having $100 million less is going to cause a terrible burden. And of course, you've no doubt heard about the Medicaid crisis. Not just from the TV ads. If you talk to anybody who receives services, you know that people are being turned down for services. If you talk to anybody who's a provider, whether it's public or private, the delay in payments, sometimes a half a year, longer than that, is placing many providers in terrible financial straits. We just heard this week that the St. Gregory's over in Bayard is changing hands because they cannot continue to function because of the low or the slow payments that they're getting on their Medicaid patients. So it's going to be a terrible crisis. It's going to be a very difficult task that the legislature is facing this January.
Well, I'd follow up on that if I may. Governor Reynolds was in town just a couple of days ago and said, among other things, that there's no going back. We can't reverse course on Medicaid privatization. The infrastructure's gone. And anybody who tries to play different in advertising or what have you is just telling you what you want to hear. Your reaction?
I respectfully disagree. When the state was operating Medicaid, the administrative costs were running between 4 to 5% of what was being paid out for services. Now with the private companies, the percentages, and it varies from company and report to report, but it's running from 12 to 20%, somewhere in that range. Now those are tax dollars that are not going to provide health care to patients. And that alone, I think, is a reason to look at going back. Now, it might not be easy to go back, it might not be quick, but I think it's pretty clear that we tried an experiment. It wasn't working for the companies either. You know, we had several providers that embarked on the system, agreed to provide services, and then pulled out of the program. So I think we're going to have to look at doing things differently. How hard or easy it is, I can't say, but I disagree that we can't go back. Yes, and Mayor.
Yes, in Perry, as you well know, as well as, unfortunately, many other communities across the state have faced horrific incidents occurring with kids, you know, being starved, being burned, being beaten, on and on it goes. What would you propose to address that? I think it's multifaceted, but what are some ideas you have to look at to deal with that?
Yeah, well, our county attorney made a reference to that. A lot of what law enforcement is having to deal with is, and our schools, to be real frank, is the mental health crisis that we have in this state. We should be really ashamed that we're 50th in the country in terms of mental health beds per capita. And that's not because we're all saner than people everywhere else. We'd like to think that, but that's not the reason. I just think that's a travesty. And I saw it as, I did dozens of civil commitment cases, and I saw how hard it was. We sometimes spend hours in the county attorney's office looking for a bed for a patient that had a mental health issue or substance abuse issue. This has to be addressed. I mean, it's not just a financial issue, it's a moral issue. Putting people in prison is not an economical way to deal with mental health, and it affects people, you know, even if you're not in the civil commitment realm. We had a family member who was suicidal, and to hear a nurse tell somebody in the emergency room that, well, it'll be 26 days before we can get this person to a psychiatrist. That's just insane. So that has to be addressed. If there are no further questions, I'm more than ready to wrap it up because it's been a long night for you and me.
Any last points that you haven't hit yet?
I think I'll just wrap it up, Jim, if that's all right with you. Again, thank you, Jim Caulfield and ThePerryNews.com, a wonderful news source. And thank you to TV12 for taping this. I appreciate that as well. Thank you again for all of you turning out here tonight. I really appreciate that a lot. That means a lot to me. I'm Warren Varley. I'm humbly asking for your vote on November 6th, or sooner if you vote early. You've seen me, I'm sure, if you're around town at all. I've been at your public events, I've been in your restaurants, I've been in meetings, I've been in your stores, and you're going to see more of me if you choose me as your representative. I want to be responsive to you, I want to represent you.
Almost every place I go, I run into Warren, and that's the truth. I want to thank you for spending so much time in Perry and showing such great interest.
Well, thank you, Mayor. That means a lot to me. One more. The real reason I'm running is a lot of people whom I respect asked me to run, including my parents, Andrew and Marilyn Varley. But the most important person was my wife, Karen, who's sitting in the back of the Varley t-shirt. We've been married 35 years, and I always listen to her. That's why I get a laugh. Because she's always right. And she told me I should run. So listen to Karen. Vote Varley November 6th.
Thanks, Warren, and thanks all the candidates for participating tonight. It seems like it's been a very informative and most enjoyable evening. Thank you all. Good night.
What's that?